Desmond Johnson, the host of Bleav in Carolina Panthers, joins me now. You can follow him on Twitter at Des_3505. That's DEZ underscore 3505. Desmond, man, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, well, doing great, man. We had a Panthers victory Monday. It's only the second one we've had like all year. So this week has flown by, and dare I say it, Panther Nation has a little bit of optimism going into the weekend, which we have not had in a while. So
Yeah,
it's a different feeling for sure.
it's weird. I mean, like the 2015 season, or no, 2014, excuse me, was so bad for everybody in the division, but it kind of feels like maybe isn't one of them. But I feel so much better about these teams than I did about those teams because a lot of those teams were kind of like the ends of certain eras where there's like a newness to a lot of this group. But yeah, the Falcons and the Panthers kind of find themselves, I think, with optimism for the first time in a while, at least this far into the season.
Yeah, I think the story of the NFC South, when we look back on it uh, at the end of the year, the division's the way it is because of there's really kind of a downward spiral at the quarterback position, like for every
Yes.
every team in the division. Atlanta's got Marcus Mariota, but it feels like he's kind of a placeholder. I think I just saw that the Saints are benching Jameis Winston for Andy Dalton going forward.
Oh, really? Like the rest of the year?
I think that's what I just saw on
they're
Twitter.
they're pulling an Indy.
Yeah, Jameis is dealing with those broken ribs or whatever it was. Yeah,
Right. He hadn't played that much anyway.
yeah. So that's going on, and then Tampa's got the issues with everything around Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's 45, and then and looking like he didn't want to come back after he did come
Right.
back. It looks like he wished he could kind of go back and do that over again. And then my boys in Carolina, where we've cycled through a billion quarterbacks in like 12 months, it feels like to land on PJ Walker, who's been here the whole time. It's kind of wild that our fortunes rest on a guy that was about 3 days from being cut.
Yeah.
If not for Matt Corral's injury, he was the fourth string quarterback. He was going to get cut, and he just to attrition just hung around as quarterbacks got hurt in front of him, and now he's the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. So go figure.
But I mean, he played well, right? This last game, like I was pretty impressed with what I saw from him against Tampa Bay, and he certainly fits the mold of that longtime backup quarterback who, maybe at one time as a rookie, it was like, all right, this guy could have some upside if everything falls the right way. Like this could be somebody to get excited about. But then you realize over time, this is probably why they're consistently a second or a third stringer. But sometimes those guys get the opportunity and they do make the most of it. So talk to me a little bit about PJ Walker. Should we expect to see more of what we saw last week against Tampa Bay or more kind of what we saw the week before that where he didn't look so hot, or is it probably somewhere in the middle?
It really depends on the Falcons, to be honest. It
Hmm.
depends on how the Falcons defense plays. I think
Which part specifically? Is this more
um,
of the coverage befuddling him or like the pass rush? Can you get to him with pressure?
you can get to him. Well, actually, the Panthers' offensive line has actually played really great this year. They've been kind of, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Rookie Ike Ekwonu's come on. Bradley
Yeah.
Bozeman, the center, looks
Bozeman
like
played
a
so
star.
well last week.
There was a stark difference in our offensive line play with Bozeman in there, and Pat Efline, who was starting at center, has been ruled out for the season. He's been put on injury reserve, so
Hmm.
Bozeman is going to be the dude there going forward. I think it's more along the lines of can the Panthers continue to run the way they did last week? Totaling over 170 yards on a Tampa Bay defense that many considered to be a pretty good run
Yeah.
defense. For them to do that with the combo of Chuba Hubbard and Deonta Foreman, I think a lot of people were worried about where's the offense going to come from. But uh, honestly, I think McCaffrey going to San Francisco might end up being the best thing for the Panthers now that I've had a week and some change to sit on it. It's almost addition by subtraction in a strange way, where now it's like you don't have that one guy that can be your crutch whenever something goes bad. You can just dump it off to him or hand it off to him. Now you got to figure it out without him. And I think about towards the end of the first quarter on Sunday against Tampa, I was still kind of my feelings about us trading McCaffrey. He's one of my favorite players. I'm like, what are we doing? He's our best guy. Are we tanking the season? And then I had the thought of we haven't really had McCaffrey like the past 2 years. Like I'm literally watching the Panthers as if I've watched them the past
Yeah.
2 years without McCaffrey. So I'm already kind of I already kind of know what it feels like to not have him there. And
Right.
once I got to that point, it was like, okay, let's see what they do. And they opened up the playbook for Walker. let him throw downfield a little bit. And dude was throwing some ropes. He really was. We've seen him throw, but we hadn't seen him throw in a while in a live action game. And he looked pretty good. So I like the game plan that offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo put together for PJ. If the Falcons are going to play defense the way Tampa did, I'd imagine a little bit of the same. It's kind of one of those offenses where it's like, this is what we're going to do. We're not trying to hide anything. Can you stop it or not? That's kind of one of those. The run game is going to be the key for all of this, where they can go into play action and everything else. So if the Falcons can stop the run game, then the Panthers might be in trouble. But if they come out running it hard in the beginning and getting some chunks of yards like they did last week, it'll be a good day for the Panthers, I think.
Yeah, I really think the inside zone game for Carolina last week was really, really solid, and it speaks to what Bradley Bozeman was able to do there at center, and some of the lanes that they were able to get. The Falcons have done a good job defending the run so far this year. I think the injuries in the secondary certainly are going to hurt in this game. DJ Moore is kind of a matchup nightmare in a lot of ways, and not necessarily in the ways that I think a lot of people would think. Like, he's not going to beat you on the most advanced routes, but he's so good after the catch that it's kind of like you don't even want him to have the ball in his hands one way or the other, because when he does, that's when he gets really dangerous. And the Falcons have struggled at times with missed tackles, and they've kind of come in bunches. Given the way that DJ Moore played last week and kind of seemed to have a big connection with PJ Walker, do you expect him again to kind of be the focal point of Carolina's passing game, or will they spread the ball around a little bit more?
A little both. I think DJ clearly is the number one wide receiver on the team and is paid as such. But I do think that they will try to spread it around a little bit, just like they did last week. They've got some guys that they can get this ball to. They don't have to just focus on one wide receiver, which I do like. There's talent on this team. I think that was the thing that bothered me the most last week was that on one hand you had people saying, "Well, the Panthers are tanking, they're horrible. There's no reason for them to try for the rest of the year." And then the same people are like circling around our carcass trying to take players. And I'm like, how can we suck if we've got all these players that people want to try to trade for, whether it was Derek Brown or JC Horn. DJ Moore's name came up in trade talks. Brian Burns, they turned down 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns. So it feels like they never were planning on tanking. They were just in a situation where they had to do something, and they decided to do it earlier in the year, which I like. I like that they did it as early as they did in terms of firing Matt Rule instead of just trudging through another season
Mhm.
with them and doing it at the end of the year, because the season's salvageable. I mean, there's 10 games left in this season, and the Panthers are 1 game out of first place, and they're
Yeah.
2-5.
They could come out of this week in ownership of first place in the NFC South if the
things
right games break the right way.
right, which is crazy because just 4 or 5 days ago, I'm fighting off like we're literally on the Bleav in Panthers podcast cursing out Panther fans. Like, what are you guys doing?
That's a
Please.
bold strategy.
Yeah. It's
You
like,
guys have it so good on this podcast here. You don't even know.
I mean, it's nuts too because then the numbers go up or whatever. So it's like it's crazy. So we're like, if you're a Panther fan, uh, and you're dissing them right now, and you're talking about what are they doing? Why are they winning? They're messing up our chance to get the number 1 pick and all this
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm not a fan of that talk.
I'm not a fan of that. And it's like, there's not even a generational talent in this draft to try to tank for. Like, who's in college football right now where you're like, that guy is the number 1 pick, no contest, it's him. Like, this isn't one of those years where there's a Peyton Manning or a Cam Newton or whoever at the top and everyone's angling to get him. So I don't understand Panther fans going on about, well, why'd they win that game? They won the game because they wanted to win the game. Like, that's why they're out there. They want to win. They're not, players don't tank. Coaches
Right.
don't tank. Front offices try to tank, but they don't have complete control over it. So this whole idea that the Panthers should tank for this 1 high draft pick in the first round that may or may not even pan out is just ridiculous to me. The Panthers have a shot to do something and turn the season around. And in my opinion, and wishes, get Steve Wilks the full-time head coaching gig. He deserves it. These guys play hard for him. We posted on a Monday video from the locker room after the Panthers won, where Wilks was giving PJ Walker the game ball, and owner David Tepper came into the locker room and gave a game ball to Coach Wilks. And it was a real emotional moment. You could tell the team was kind of rallying behind Steve Wilks.
Yeah.
And I think that they're riding that momentum right now. That they're playing for him. They want to play for him going forward, and they're playing to try to keep him. So I think that's the difference. Panthers are going to be playing with emotion. I'm not sure if the Falcons are going to be able to match that or not, based off of what the Panthers figured out last week.
Yeah, so keep going about Steve Wilks a little bit there. Like, what are his tendencies? Is he going to be more aggressive? Is he going to be a little bit more conservative? Does he like to run the ball? Is he going to establish the pass like defensively? Like, what what can we expect from a Steve Wilks led team compared to what we've seen previously under Matt Rule?
The similarities between him and Ron Rivera are there. Of course, he was Rivera's defensive coordinator.
Right.
Uh, did that well enough through 2017 that parlayed it into a head coaching job at Arizona. Granted, the Tidwells only gave him, or the Bills only gave him a year, but he's a head coach. He is a head coach, and I asked that question to Jonathan Stewart. I think last week before we played the game, and Stu said basically, because Stu was on the team when Wilkes was there as defensive coordinator, and he was like he used to love it when like say like Rivera had an appointment or something, couldn't be there for whatever reason, and Wilkes would actually do the speech. He'd do the pregame speech, or he'd do whatever the pump
Nice.
up speech for the team.
Yeah.
And Stu was like, "Man, that dude will make you run through a wall." He was like, "I used to bring a notepad with me, like if I knew he was talking, because I knew he was going to drop some kind of jewel in that speech, and I wanted to write it down so I could look at it later." Like I'm just like, "Wow!" So
Yeah.
he's been rooting for him. I've been rooting for him. Skylar Callahan's been rooting for him. Where he the difference between Steve Wilkes' press conferences and Matt Rule's press conferences is amazing. Like Matt Rule felt like he kind of fumbled through every single one he had, trying to find the right answers to please everyone. Steve Wilks ain't about that game. Steve Wilks comes in, he is disciplined, he is straightforward and to the point. He's a football coach. He's a leader of men. Like he makes people want to follow him. And we never caught that vibe with Rule. Rule felt like he was still running a college program, like here, and dealing with college age men,
Yeah.
where Wilkes is talking as if he's in a room with adults, and like he gets it, he understands it. To answer the rest of your question, he's a defensive minded coach, so he's going to run the ball. He's going to keep his defense off the field as much as possible. It's all about clock management, controlling the time of possession, not putting your quarterback out there in a situation where they may be forced to turn it over or just be in a bad spot. They're going to
Hmm.
put PJ in situations where they know he can handle whatever it is, and they're going to lean on that running back platoon. They're going to lean on that running back platoon and have Atlanta try to stop it before they do anything else. And then once they get a lead, he's going to send the dogs hunting on defense. Like that's kind of it's Rivera ball, really. That's what we were doing when Rivera was here. And honestly, anytime the Panthers have had success the past 26 plus years, no matter who the coach has been, that's
Yeah.
been the Panthers' culture. Run the ball, stop the run, let your defense make the big plays, special teams kick in, quarterback, don't mess this up. And when we get that formula down pat, the Panthers have great years. And I'm curious to see if they can keep this going this week, because if they can do it 2 weeks in a row, that tells me, okay, they can do this all year. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do that against Atlanta.
It definitely will. I want to get to the defense here in one sec because I mean they to me are like the story of this team, but you mentioned kind of keeping them off of the field, letting them get plenty of rest to go after the quarterback, do all that they do. That obviously means that Carolina's offense is going to have to be good on third down. They're going to have to convert their chances in the red zone, touchdowns, not field goals. They've not been great in those two areas so far this year. They're dead last in third down percentage on offense, and they're 30th in the red zone. Any improvement in those two areas recently? What's the cause of third down? Are these third and longs? Are they not getting third and shorts? Anything that you've noticed there?
Well, it almost feels like two different seasons, because before last week, when McCaffrey was still here, Robbie Anderson was still here, we were, Baker Mayfield was still the quarterback. It kind of felt like McAdoo, the offensive coordinator, was trying to show off the pieces he had, Baker in particular. And Baker, I hate to say it because I wanted him here, he didn't have enough time, or maybe splitting the reps with Sam Darnold in the preseason. I don't know what it is, but he just never looked comfortable in the offense that they threw out there. And then once he got hurt and PJ came in, it was almost like McAdoo had to simplify the playbook or make it smaller for PJ, and then adjust it out as we went. So we saw
Hmm.
from that first week with PJ to last week where they were doing a whole lot more offensively and actually going downfield. Where with the Rams, they only went downfield like once the entire game, and that was a ball that sailed out of bounds like 5 yards or whatever. The rest of it was just side to side at the line of scrimmage, almost these snake uh, screens that they were trying to
A
run.
lot of screens last week too.
They never tried. They never tried to go downfield. And we had a theory that, well, I had a theory. I'm not going to throw Skylar and Stu into it, but I had a theory that they were doing that the week before because they were trying to increase the price for Christian McCaffrey. Because the rumors were that they were already talking to the Rams and the 49ers, and I think there was another team before that game, and they kind of hit a stalemate. And then we come out in that game, and all of a sudden, Christian McCaffrey's 80% of the offense, where it was like they had forgot about him the whole first part of the year. Rams game, give it to McCaffrey, give it to McCaffrey. Like they didn't even try to do anything else. So it was almost like they used that game as a way to increase what they could get for McCaffrey. I think they didn't expect the whole Robbie Anderson thing to happen that same game. So that kind of changed the timeline a little bit. But it felt like they were willing to give that game away for an opportunity to push reset on the season and not have McCaffrey here, not have Anderson here, and just kind of go from there. And that's kind of what's happened. So there's, like I said, there's 10 games left in the season. Like there's a long way to go. I wouldn't write off any team yet at this point. I mean, there's just so much football left to be played. We haven't even got cold yet.
Right.
This division, I see people saying that, it reminds them of 2014 where everybody was under 500. The Panthers won that
Yep.
that year. People might forget Carolina entered December or the last week of November 3-8-1 and went on a 5-game win streak or a 4-game win streak, beat every team in the division and a couple others, finished 7-8-1, won the division, and then won the playoff game they had against Arizona. And they still to this day hold the record for the fewest yards allowed in a playoff game was in that game. And that season set up 2015 where they rattled off 14 straight wins, went 15-1, all that stuff. So I feel like this season's kind of a setup for whoever wins the division. It might set them up going forward. But again, it's in such a flux, this division. There's such a turnover for the quarterback position and the coaching positions where it's like, I have no idea who's going to win this division. Like, 6 weeks into it, I have zero idea. It could be any of the four, and it wouldn't surprise me whoever won it. But I feel good knowing that the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast, we do 2 episodes a week, and we were starting to look at it like, how are we going to do 2 episodes a week of this? Like, like what are we supposed to talk about? But
Yeah.
each week
It can be hard.
something's happened, and we're like, oh, okay, we can talk about Robbie's
Right.
outburst, or we can talk about McCaffrey getting traded, or we can talk about a win. So it's been an interesting year already for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, about the NFC South, and it does feel very much up to grabs. And part of me thinks that it could come down to just which individual unit is best in this division. Whether it be a whole defense, whether like the Falcons, it be their run game. Can Tampa Bay's passing offense get it together? Can New Orleans defense get it together? Like whichever one can become dominant could really be something that swings it, because these are not complete teams by any stretch of the imagination. We know that Atlanta's run game is going to be their bread and butter on offense. But looking at Carolina's defense, which again, I think is the strength of this team, it's so interesting, the numbers, because they're really good on a per play basis. They're 8th in rushing yards per play. They're 9th in passing yards per play. They're 10th in yards per play. But then their per game numbers, 18th in total yards per game, 21st in rushing yards per game, 19th in passing yards per game. And you look at their time of possession, the Panthers are dead last in time of possession. So this defense is a good defense. Don't let the overall stats fool you. They're just out on the field way, way too much. It looks like last week they found kind of that magic formula, and we saw a much more aggressive Panthers defense because they were able to have the energy throughout the game to sustain that aggression. Do you think that they've found maybe a working formula to move forward, and we're going to start seeing those numbers kind of creep more closely in the middle and maybe be a top 10 unit overall by the end of the season? Like, what is your expectation for the Panthers defense in this game, knowing that Atlanta's been able to run the ball pretty well against pretty much everybody they've played so far?
I do think the defense is going to improve throughout the year because now Steve Wilks will have his hand on it more so than he did before, because he was the secondary coach when he came back at the beginning of the year.
Right.
Phil Snow, who also was seen the door or showed the door when Matt Rule went out. He was a Matt Rule guy. He's followed him everywhere and been his defensive coordinator. There had been rumblings that Phil Snow and Steve Wilks weren't on the same page based on defensive philosophy. And looking back
Mm.
on it, Wilks was probably right. So the main script for the Panthers the past couple of years has been basically they're super competitive. They rarely get blown out against anybody. Like they took Kansas City and Arrowhead a year or two ago all the way down to the final. They had to kick a 60+ yard field goal to win the game. Just stuff like that. I think Kansas City had just come off the Super Bowl. They play competitive no matter who they're playing against. And then usually what would happen under Matt Rule and Phil Snow in the fourth quarter, the opposing team's offense would just rattle off like a 7 or 8 minute long drive and would just stay out there. And we couldn't get off the field. And they would take the lead. And then we ended up losing by 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. And that would be every single week. It was the same way they were losing every week. And like I said, with Matt Rule, we rarely got blown out with him as coach, but we rarely won too. And we led, I think, in all these games that we lost in the fourth quarter. So the writing was there. And Steve Wilks was basically saying, so we had heard that Phil Snow likes to use these smaller, faster linebackers.
Yeah.
Which he does if you look at who
your Devin Whites, your Deion Jones, like that type. Yeah.
And Wilks's argument to that was that that's fine, but by the time we get to the fourth quarter, these guys are worn out and they can't stop anybody. So we're stuck out there on the field and we end up losing games. And apparently that might be the case because the first week that he was out, they kept the Rams fairly close until towards the end when things started to, boil over. And then last week, you saw the formula really start to work. The defense got stronger as the game went on. They frustrated Tampa Bay more as the game went on. And it's kind of snowballed out. And I think that's going to be the way they play going forward. This team is going to live and die off their defense. Their stars that are left on this team, they're all rookie contracts. They're all on defense. Derek Brown, J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin's coming back from injury soon. Those are going to be the cornerstones of this team going forward. And I think it makes a lot of sense to keep a guy that's a defensive-minded guy like Steve Wilks as head coach going forward if he can provide these wins and convince David Tepper, because all those guys are over there, and they've made a point to say we're keeping those guys and building with them. So I do think there was a huge difference in philosophy with Wilks taking over, and Al Holcomb, the defense coordinator, has been with Wilks for a while, as compared to the regime before. I don't think they'll get worn out as much in the fourth quarter, and the offense can get out there and run time of possession like we want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, what Brian Burns has done this season, I really, really wanted the Falcons to draft him when he was coming out of Florida State. He was one of my draft crushes that year. I was like, God, look at the flexibility on this dude. He's so freaking
Spider-Man.
bendy, and yeah, he's so good. 5 sacks on the year, was awesome against Tampa Bay. So he is concerning. You mentioned J.C. Horn. He's really come on very strong in his second year, kind of picking up where he left off last year before kind of injuries started to factor into the mix. So is there anybody on this team, and it doesn't have to just be defense, special teams, offense, who we have not talked about yet and may not be a player who many Falcons fans are aware of, but who could kind of swing a game? Like the Falcons, we saw Avery Williams have a key punt return last week against the Bengals just before halftime to tack on a field goal, was essentially almost single-handedly. So is there somebody like that who could have a moment or two in this game who might surprise some Falcons fans?
Remember the name Frankie Louvu. Frankie Louvu has begun to pop on screens. He's a linebacker. I think he previously played for the Jets. Got on with us here. A lot of people call him a Matt Rule guy, but he's basically gone from being like bottom of the depth chart to being a starter at linebacker. And he flies, man. He's all over the place. If he's healthy and he's in there, he's going to be a name you see a bunch on Sunday. I would pay attention to the running back duo. Most people think of Christian McCaffrey when they think of running back at Carolina, but the duo of Deonta Foreman and Chuba Hubbard, with Deonta Foreman last year, he was with the Titans, and when Henry went
Arthur
out,
Smith guy.
Yeah, when he went out, literally Deonta Foreman kept the Titans rolling, rushing wise, and they finished number 1 in their division again. And of course, they flamed out a little bit early in the playoffs, but he's a hard runner. He's a bruiser. I actually told Stu, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Stu, a little bit in terms of me calling them double trouble 2.0 because they're kind of
He's
set up.
not D'Angelo Williams, though. Chuba's
No,
not D'Angelo.
Chuba's not D'Angelo, but he's kind of the scat back in that situation where
Yeah.
and Stu is not as big as Foreman is either, but they both would look for contact. They both can turn a big run, and they worked in tandem, like together. They were two different complementary styles of running. To me, that's the key. PJ's not going to really kill you with his arm. He's not going to go out and throw for 350 yards. He might throw for an efficient 200 and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and that can win the game if his running game is there. If the Panthers get over 100 yards rushing, I feel like they'll win the game. To me, that's the key. Like if the Panthers can get over 100 yards rushing, then they have a good shot to win the football game. If they don't, and the Falcons can hold them under that, that means they're relying on PJ to get in some kind of gunslinging match with Marcus Mariota, and I don't know if PJ is capable of doing that. So, that to me, that's the key. Get these running backs lathered up, get the offensive line lathered up, let them run the ball early and often, and that'll set up the play action pass and everything else that we saw last week. But everything they did last week, it's not like it was something that you can't do. Like it was basic football, basically. They just went back to basic football.
Yeah.
And we've been asking for it for months. It's like, why don't they do this? Why are they running Baker Mayfield in RPO? Like stuff like that. It's like, no one's
Yeah.
going to think Baker Mayfield's going to take off on a run like an RPO. And they did that the first 2 weeks of
And
the year.
if he is, it's not like
We're in
that's the best option on
Yeah.
that play.
Go
Yeah.
run, Baker. We want you to run. Like that it was baffling to us. And then it's like you bring in PJ Walker. It's like, well, now you can run RPO because PJ's got some wheels. He could actually do it. And they don't. They got him under center. They got him doing other stuff. So, it is what it is. Ben McAdoo has made my tell him why you're mad Thursday list like 4 times out of like 7 weeks or whatever already
Yeah.
this year. So
He's never been my favorite play caller, but I can guarantee that PJ Walker's not going to get into any type of throwing competition with Marcus Mariota because Marcus Mariota is not allowed to be in any type of throwing competition. He's not allowed to throw the ball more than 15
I
times
was
in
gonna
the game.
say, didn't you guys only throw the ball like 13 times or something last week or
Yeah.
something crazy
Yeah.
like that? Was that
So
by design or
design is certainly a word choice there. I think it is what the Falcons do best, and I think that everything they do stems from the run game. I think that they Bleav that the best version of themselves is it's all aligned. The point of the spear is the run game. The offensive line, the best thing they do, run block. They had the scheme. They focus a lot of their energy on that. The pass routes, I think, leave like the route combinations leave a little bit to be desired in my opinion. But it's a lot of 2-man concepts, a lot of 3-man concepts. They're leaving a lot of guys in to protect because it's all mental mind games with the defense. And that's what I'm really curious to see a defensive guy like Steve Wilks, how he comes out for this Falcons offense because it fatigues the defense mentally as much as it does physically because every play there's motion. It's motion that is going to change rules on like for what the defense is going to do. It's going to change the defensive front. And as they're shifting, they're going to motion back to something else that's going to change it all again. It's nonstop. It comes after you play after play after play, and it wears teams down. So it sounds like the Panthers kind of want to play a similar run oriented kind of we're going to stick to our strengths. We're going to impose our will on the defense and try to control the pace of this game. We already know that that's what the Falcons want to do, and it's something that they do very well. It sounds to me like you see this as a quicker, lower scoring game. Is that kind of where you're leaning with this one?
I kind of feel like I haven't done my predictions yet because we'll do that. I'll do that with Stu a little bit later on, but I kind of feel like this is a game the Panthers can win if they follow the same formula they did the week before. Like the formula they did the week before, you can do that to any team. Now the results might be different, and Tampa came into that game reeling a little bit. But I feel like they could do this with any other team in the division. That simple formula: run the ball, stop the run, cause some turnovers, don't turn it over. Especially with this Atlanta team. I mean, you guys are averaging over 180 yards on the ground, or not 180. Excuse me. You're at 156 right now per game, fourth in the league. So we know coming in what the assignment is. The assignment is we need to stop you guys from running the football because passing yard wise, I'm trying to find. And I'm going to talk. Carolina's at the bottom of both of these pretty much right now. Atlanta's next to last in passing yards per game,
Right.
151 yards per game. So I think it's going to be a battle of. It's going to be one of those rock fight type games because it's going to be dominated by the run. I think on both sides, and it'll come down to which team can stop the run more effectively. Whichever team can do that and wins the turnover battle will probably win the football game. And I know that sounds simple, Pop Warner type of logic, but it is what it is. I mean, if we can outrush the Falcons on Sunday and cause a turnover or two, I feel pretty good about our chances to win that football game. Uh, it's just a matter of which team is going to do it. And it's almost like just after 1 week, it's almost like the teams are kind of different directions, I guess, maybe you could say. But that could change after, 3 hours on Sunday, just like it did for the
Yeah.
Panthers. So it's a wild division. We're used to it. NFC South. We get it like once every 4 years where it's just like a wacky year and uh, a team you don't expect ends up winning the division or injuries affect something or whatever it might be. I think it's one of those years in the NFC South. It's impossible to pick who's going to win games from week to week because you don't know what team's going to show up. Like all four of them, they're all
For
just
sure.
something with all of them. They all have issues. So,
This sorry, continue.
go ahead. No, I was done.
I will say no. I mean the Falcons for the most part, like this past game was bad. It was their worst game by far, but they've been a consistent team by and large, week in and week out. You are right. Both teams, I think the strategy is going to be run the ball. Um, that seems like the most obvious. Because with the Falcons, it's more when they pick their spots to pass. It's how effective can they be when they do choose to put it up, and they've been one of the most efficient teams in the league when they do choose to pass. It's just not something they do very often. My key to this game, and it kind of plays into, I think, the running as well, because part of this will, you know, factor into, all right, what are the third down distances? Like how many times are you able to stay ahead of the sticks in your series and things like that? But that is third down, fourth down, red zone, these situational aspects of the game that coaches harp on incessantly. Against Tampa Bay, you guys held their offense 2 of 12 on third down, 1 of 3 on fourth down, over 1 in the red zone. I don't think that you guys are going to have as much success duplicating those numbers against the Falcons because they've been one of the best offenses in the league this season on third down and in the red zone, and especially lately. So to me, that's going to be the breaking point. It's two teams that are going to be, like fully grown Rams. Just they know that they're going to butt heads. Like they know I'm lining up, you're lining up, we're going to hit heads when we meet in the middle. It's now about the details. It's now about those little situational aspects to me. And so that is where I think Atlanta's going to have a slight edge just because they've been better and more consistent in that area. But the wrong day, and certainly it can go Carolina's way.
Uh, it, I want to say for those on the outside looking in and have seen the Panthers box scores and whatever putrid highlights we had going up until last week. Uh, there is something different going on now that Wilks is in charge. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was here before. Because, see, Matt Rule didn't understand Panther culture. And I say that a lot.
What is Panther culture?
Panther culture. So Panther culture, the whole keep pounding, the family vibe. You can go all the way back to Dom Capers, the very first coach, George Seifert, uh, uh, John Fox, Ron Rivera, where the philosophy was pretty much the same with all of those guys. Like I've been saying in all episode, run the football, stop the run. It doesn't matter what level of football you play. If you can do those two things, you're going to win more games than you lose. It's just it won't change no matter what they do with the rules or anything else. And Matt Rule never really subscribed to that. And Matt Rule kind of did away, and David Tepper to a certain extent, with certain traditions and things that Panther fans had come to enjoy. Like, if they win the last minute or so before the clock runs out, they're at home, they play Sweet Caroline.
Mm-hmm.
And they took that away for a week, and the Panther fans went nuts. Like,
oh, wow.
What are you doing? And it was right back the next week. Or the pounding of the drum at the beginning of the game, or, having former players, in and out and that kind of thing. I forgot who it was that said it. It might have been Brian Burns or somebody, but they said at the beginning of the week that last week, one of the things that got them juiced up was that Steve Wilks actually brought in a tape of highlights of them versus their NFC South opponents, like over the years, to get them hyped to play Tampa. And it just little things like that. So you can understand, okay, this is a rivalry. This is a divisional game. Like we need these games. And for him to do that, it perked the players up. It got their ears kind of perked up like, oh, okay, this is what it's about. And there's still players on this team that were here before Matt Rule that understand the last 2017 was last year. We had a winning season. Cam Newton was still the quarterback. McCaffrey's rookie year. Like everything still felt like, okay, we're still in the middle of something, and we've gone
Yeah.
downhill since then. And those players realized it, and you can start to see there's a sense of pride kind of coming back in the building that had been gone for about a year and a half. And I think that's the thing. It's an emotional game, and I think
Yeah.
that's the thing where you can kind of ride the teams that are kind of going up and see the teams that are kind of going another way. And
Hmm.
although both these teams seem pretty even matched the way it looks, they kind of run the same stuff. I feel like Carolina's going in a different direction right now in terms of where they are mentally in the season, and feeling like they've hit a reset button on the whole thing. And it's just seeing PJ succeed. It helped the defense feels better about it. So they play harder. Whereas before they would see Baker throw an interception or Sam throw an interception or somebody at fumbles. They got to go
Yeah.
right back out there again, and it's like over and over and over. It's like, here we go again. We got to go out here and bail this defense out again. And now it's like, okay, now we've got something where we can go hunt, and it's more fun for us because we know the offense is going to hold their own. That's something you can't buy. That's something you can't pin down. And we'll see if it transfers over to this week. But I feel like it's two trains going in two different directions right now. And if Carolina can harness what they did last week, then I think it'll show the rest of the league that, hey, they might be a factor going forward, depending on how this game goes. But I'm going to go with Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a week where, like you say, last week, two very different outcomes, two very different storylines, but it's just one week. And so we'll see for Atlanta, is this the start of a trend? And oh no, as injuries mount, maybe they are heading in the opposite direction. Maybe they've been punching above their weight a little bit to start the season, what have you. Or maybe the Falcons are able to turn it around. We're going to be looking at that game as the outlier, and things will get right back on track. For Carolina, it's about stacking,
Yeah.
right? They've got that win last week. Everything feels like the momentum is there to be captured because you've got a new coach. You traded away McCaffrey. The Ewing theory is in effect. It feels like, maybe a little bit of an addition by subtraction because everybody's locked in, their focus, they're playing for each other. Now, can you kind of recapture that magic, keep it going against another division opponent? And we will see if they can do just that. But Desmond Johnson, this podcast has been magic. Thank you so much for hopping on. Please let everybody know what you've got going on, and shout out anything you want to. The floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, I have too much going on. We host the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast. Shout out to everybody at Bleav that's helped us grow this podcast, especially over the past 12 months. We've been super pleased with watching the progression of it, especially since we've added Jonathan Stewart on. It's myself, Jonathan Stewart, all-time Panthers leading rusher, and Skylar Callahan, who is the Panthers beat writer for Sports Illustrated. We're on every Monday and Thursday afternoon, usually live. You can go to the Tobacco Road Sports Radio YouTube channel or our Facebook watch page and watch it there. Or you can stream it all major podcast platforms: Spotify, Google, iTunes, all the usual suspects. Trying to think. Here in the Carolinas, I have a Saturday morning show that you've been on a few times, actually, The Rundown
Mhm.
with Desmond Johnson. It's on WWBG 1470 AM, 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Uh, and a bunch of other stuff. Like I'm not really hard to to find at this point. So I appreciate you having me on, Will. And I'm probably gonna see if you'll return the favor, come and over to the Bleav one for the Panthers for the second game between the Panthers and the Falcons. Either that or my radio show, one or the other. We'll figure it out, and maybe we'll go grab Joey from the Bears Bleav podcast too, and do another roundtable like we've done in the past. So I just want a good game, like
Yeah.
I want a good game. Of course I want to win, but
Yeah.
I just want to be entertained. I'm so tired of sitting through these games and being bored. And it felt like that until last week, where it was just like a chore. Like it felt like homework that I had to sit there and watch the game. So I knew what I was talking about on the podcast. And now I actually look forward to the season. It's like the first time in a couple of years where I'm looking forward to what happens the rest of the year. So that's a dangerous feeling for a young team to have, and this team is young. They're super young. They're not used
Yep.
to winning.
Yep.
So, I want to see if they can build off this and help Steve Wilks with his campaign become the full-time head coach, because he's got some rooters in his corner.
It's exciting, man. Everything, it feels like the future's ahead of you. Falcons fans, like, we're kind of in the same boat. This year is a little bit of a weird one-off year because a lot of one-year contracts who are veteran guys, but
You guys did
Gravy.
the right thing getting off of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones when you did. I will say that.
Apparently,
Yeah,
yeah.
apparently, because they a lot of times you'll see a team just hang on to a guy a year or two too late, and you guys let them go uh, probably right on time. So,
Yeah.
the rebuild is on basically in Atlanta to kind of get things good. That don't mean you can't win football games. Trust me, if I know, I know. Like, that doesn't mean anything. You can still try to win football games while you're rebuilding. So
Yeah, you definitely can.
we're not taking the Falcons lightly at all. We can't afford to. We're 2-5. So it's
No.
like, no, we don't want to take anybody lightly. We want to come in there and actually try to accomplish what we want to do. And hopefully we get a game on Sunday.
The rebuilding. That'll be the matchup. That's what
Yeah.
we'll call it. But yeah, no, hopefully it's a great game. Um, we haven't had a good Falcons Panthers matchup in a while, so we're overdue.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to say it's been a while, actually, even when we were good.
yeah,
2015, of course, was our year. 2016 was you guys' year. God,
yep,
2016, I think, was the year Julio caught like
yeah,
300
just
yards.
absolutely ended. Was it James Bradbury or was it Captain Munnerlyn?
It was James Bradbury.
It was James Bradbury. Yeah,
Yeah, he
just
basically
ended his career
put him to the bench, and
with the Panthers, at least. Yeah,
yeah, and I think Matt Ryan threw close to 500 yards. He might have threw over
yep.
500 yards in that game.
Julio had over 300. Matt had over 500. Yeah, a lot
Insane.
of records were broken on that day. That
Yes,
was a good one.
because we let Josh Norman go in the offseason after the Super Bowl. He went and signed with the Reds or Washington, and he would have normally been on Julio Jones, and it was almost like they intentionally were like, oh, he's not there, so we're just
Yeah.
gonna keep throwing it to Julio Jones. Worst day of my life, it felt like, and that was 6 years ago. So I mean, this is a divisional game. They'll get after it just because it's the Falcons. I'm expecting a good one. I'm expecting a good one.
Well, let's hope you're right. Desmond, thank you so much for joining me, man. This was a blast.
Sure, man. Anytime. Let me know.